Hello, everyone. This is Brother Benson Media, and today is a Monday and it's special because we have our special guest today. So, before we go into the main conversation, may I take this opportunity to invite my guest to introduce himself to those who are watching currently and those who will be watching after the show. Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening, dear viewers. From here in Nairobi, it's about 20 minutes to 9 East
Mhm.
African time. So, good evening. I bet it's a different time if, in case you're not in our zone. My name is MUTHIORA KARIARA, a former presidential running mate and presidential aspirant in the 2022 Kenya general election. I am a passionate Kenyan who believes that it's possible within our generation to make this country great. It's a joy to be connecting with you via Benton Otieno Media. I hope we'll have fun as we chat the evening away today.
Thank you so much. We are going to have fun because what we do here, we are just having conversation about the country that we love and maybe to get solution that can propel up propel us somewhere so that we can have a country that we can be proud of. Indeed, we are very proud of our country, but I think we need to do more. My leader, we are almost like 2 months into the new year, and there's so much happening in our country. On your own view, what is your take on the country right now, the state of the people or the state of the nation?
Well, economically, Kenya has been teetering on the precipice of a collapse. We have huge debt obligations that we've been struggling to meet, but then the government of the day has made it their specialty to tax Kenyans out of whatever quagmire we've got. On top of that, they've been borrowing. They removed the debt ceiling we had, so they have room to borrow more. So the hole we were in is deeper now because instead of trying to get out, we've been digging. So when the economic status of a country is not good, and yet that country's biggest portion of the population is the youth, then of course we are sitting on a time bomb because should things go haywire and we are not able to meet our debt obligation, then
Mhm.
our economy will become insolvent, and that can cause civil strife because when you have so many people not able to make their ends meet, then you have a crisis in your hands. That's where we are right now. In June, we must repay the Eurobond, and
Mhm.
I have been researching to see how we are going to do that without having to borrow,
Mhm.
and answers are not forthcoming. So we're not sitting pretty. KRA is collecting less and less each month, and those in authority are thinking about how they can get an extra coin from those who
Mhm.
are already burdened by taxes. So we're not sitting pretty, Benson.
I agree with you. And I want to ask you about the personality and the competency. When you look at our country in the political scene, is where like the people in the leadership, especially the political, they usually reward the loyalist or the people they deem to have supported them. And the majority of them might not be competent in what they are doing. For instance, when you look at the release of KCSE uh, last month, and even the educational sector, if you compare that when Honorable Matiangi was there and the late Magoa, and right now, do you see any good thing to speak about, especially in
No,
education sector?
there is nothing good to write home about with regard to the leaders that have been put in charge of portfolios by the current regime. The cabinet we've got is very uninspiring. Number one, our president took political rejects, I'll call them so, although there are
Mhm,
some who had run for office and won and had to resign.
mhm,
But then you look at the others, there are people who have never held such portfolios before, people who would not inspire confidence in investors so we can have capital flow into Kenya.
mhm,
His own admission was that there are cabinet secretaries who are less competent than himself, yet they are heads of portfolios. So
mhm,
we have leaders who, by our president's own admission, are not competent enough to be holding those portfolios, yet he has not moved to fire them or replace them with more competent Kenyans, even though we know such
mhm,
individuals abound. You've used a very good example about the results that were released the other day, where in the morning a candidate would have this grade, and then in the evening they would have a different grade.
yeah.
And explanations were not forthcoming. So we had competent people before.
Mhm,
Dr. Matiang'i did a good job. Professor Magoha came and built on that foundation. So I had hoped that this new regime would pick from where those others left it. But then clearly, we have retrogressed as a country. I mentioned about how poorly we are doing
mhm,
as an economy. You
mhm,
look at the state of our education. This
mhm,
government unfortunately took charge when we were still experimenting with the junior secondary school program. And then right now, there are talks about again another revision of that curriculum so that instead of how it's set up now, there's going to be yet another change. So
mhm,
they seem like people who are shooting in the dark, people unsure about what tomorrow should look like, yet they are our vision bearers. So I'm scared, to say the least, knowing that I have a cabinet that is clueless. I
mhm.
have a parliament that cannot hold the executive accountable. And I have an overbearing executive that's even trying to usurp the powers that the Constitution has apportioned to the judiciary. Anyway, we've
Mm.
got hope,
Uh-huh.
even as we try to keep those in authority accountable.
Okay, talking about the parliament, and from the look of things, when we look at the history of our parliament, the parliament we have now is one of those parliament that we say is the worst, based on how it is working, whereby it seems like they are working under the direction of the executive. And when you look at our constitution, it has separation of power, whereby the legislature, they have that power to do what they should do according to the law. So if we continue like this, whereby the executive will be calling the shots on the legislature, do you think that we are headed in the right direction as a country?
No, we are not. And you described it correctly that this is one of the worst parliaments that Kenya has ever had. And this is why immediately they won the positions that got them to that parliament. Those on the other side of the divide considered joining government. And
Mm,
when a deal was made for them to switch roles, they never
mm,
thought twice about it. They did not remember the electorate who put them in office. They switched and joined the governing party. They
mm,
actually were bought. And someday I'm sure evidence that is irrefutable will come to the fore.
mm,
So when you forget who sent you wherever you get your daily bread, then clearly you cannot be executing whatever role, I would say, out of a clean heart, you would be a puppet of the person that got you to cross the floor. So, whatever you do, there will be conflict because number one, you betrayed the call, and then number two, there will be interests by those who bought you that you must fulfill, which sometimes will conflict with those of the people who sent you there. So, our current parliament is an extension of the executive. It's actually like an annex of the executive.
Mhm.
Bills come, and in a record time, they are passed. You recall there is the acrimonious Finance Act 2023 2024 that was hugely unpopular. Kenyans rejected it. And it's these same Kenyans who had elected the members of parliament. But then, when this debate was had in parliament, they passed the finance bill. So we have a captured parliament that does not represent the will of the people, and we have an overbearing executive. When these two are not separated, clearly we have a situation like the one we had when Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta joined forces with Raila Amolo Odinga, and by definition, we kind of did not have an opposition. So right now, it's everything that the president says that goes, not necessarily what the common Monanchi wants.
And by the way, speaking of the former president and the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga coming together, and this one bring me to about what we called the ideology of a particular party.
Yes.
And from that assessment, do you see us as a country, our parties are having ideology, what they stand for? Because if you look very keenly, let's say the party of the right prime minister and the party of the former president, the Jubilee and ODM, these were very competitive parties with different on how they think, on how they want. But now these are people now coming together and working together. On what ideology were they coming together?
Well, it was basically personalities. It was Raila Amolo Odinga on one side and
Mhm,
Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta on the other side. No
mhm,
principles, nothing. Just common interests for these two individuals that at that particular time coincided with those of the nation because the antagonism needed to die down. We needed calm, we needed peace. So these two realized that they would gain more by working together than if they continued to antagonize each other. In Kenya,
mhm,
unfortunately, if you look at the constitutions for most of these parties, they're almost the same. Like
mhm,
the Orange Democratic Movement Party, they say they are social democrats. You go through their constitution and their ideologies. Yes, in text, there is that. But
mhm,
then look at how that party has operated over the years. To
mhm,
date, this party has never held successful grassroots elections to
mhm,
elect officials. Yet, they have the D in their name that stands for democracy, where members are supposed to come and call the shots. But then they've not been able to exercise that democracy per se. The Jubilee Party that did a handshake with, call it the opposition back then, was a ruling party. But then an election after, and it's almost dead. If that party stood for something, I'm sure the members would still believe in the ideals and principles of the party and they'd be looking to do a comeback given that we still have a number of elections. But because parties in Kenya are merely election vehicles for individuals to get into office, they
mhm,
do not mean much. There are smaller parties that are trying to come up, that are
mhm,
trying to be based at least on some form of ideologies. I could
mhm,
mention we have a communist party in Kenya. I don't
mhm.
know if you knew about that.
Yeah.
We have other very specific parties like the Farmers Party of Kenya, and a
Mhm.
lot of other parties. We have almost 100 parties. Now, my hope is that these parties will do things the right way. So
Mhm.
even the big parties can learn from them, have an ideology, stick by it, and then using that, draw members to yourself. Personally, I have been in the process of building a political party together with others who ascribe to the Utu philosophy.
Mhm.
Utu being the essence of being that connects us humans to each other and to the environment, and that in everything you do, you think about the impact of that action or non action, given that you do not live alone in the universe. So we are trying to build a party that's based on principles. It's
Yeah.
not easy, especially given that we're in a country where the head of state does not believe in democracy.
Democracy. Mhm.
In his very first budget, he slashed the allocation for political parties by about 60%. Yet he says he's pro democracy. So I know it's a rough terrain for those looking to do things the right way, but
Mhm.
then we have to try. And those in the bigger parties, I keep reminding them that if you're in an influential position, try to remind those that make decisions that there was a time when they believed in the ideals of that party, and it's not
Mm.
too late for them to revert back. So, for the sake of Kenya's posterity, we can build these institutions because, as our constitution says, Kenya shall be a multi party democratic country. So, we must have parties.
Okay.
And for parties to govern properly, they
Mhm.
must be structured accordingly. They must be strong. They cannot
Mhm.
merely just be election vehicles.
Yes, and that one brings me again to the political parties that we have. And when you look at our political parties and just try to internalize them, our political parties are about the regionalism. They are region based, like where you're coming from. Like for instance, when you go to the Cumberland, the Wiper will be there as the strongest. Come to the central Kenya, we used to have the Jubilee, but right now we have the UDA. The Kalenjin nation, the same, the Luo nation also have there. And you look at them, are they institution the way the constitution say, or they are personalized?
Well, I saw you trying to be politically correct. You did
Hmm.
not want to use the word tribal straight up. But
Yeah.
the truth is, the
Hmm.
foundation of a majority of the big parties is tribal, where these heads of states, I mean, heads of these parties realized that they could exploit that loophole by
Hmm.
making their people feel insecure, that they had something to protect, and so they needed to come together and advance their interests. But that has not served this nation since independence. We know that once a leader ascends to office, he is sworn in his individual capacity.
Yeah.
Tribes do not take oath of office. Tribes do not, how do I explain this?
Mm.
As in, tribes do not serve people. They are only useful as a mobilization tool.
Mhm.
Once a leader assumes office, it's his family and his cronies and those close to them that benefit. So, this kind of politics has not served Kenya since independence. It's not going to. And it's worse because for Kenya, we have individuals who are greater, sometimes even more than the tribe itself. And I will quote examples. For instance, in 2013, when William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta were seeking to be elected president and deputy president, those individuals were bigger than their tribes. You look at Raila Odinga, he is an institution in himself. If you ask and someone answers you honestly, they will tell you that it's the ODM party that needs Raila Odinga and not Raila Odinga that needs ODM.
Mhm.
Yet, it should be the other way. Yes, it's true that during the nascent stages of a nation, individuals build institutions. But then, for a country that is 60 years old,
Yeah.
I think it was a bad idea for us to kill the parties that got us to the multi party era. You recall we had the Independence Party KANU,
Mhm.
we had KADU, we had these are the parties that started in the 90s, the Ford and all those other parties. Had individuals not made those parties be about themselves, that
Mhm.
there would be bigger institutions today that transcend or are greater than the individuals. So what we did not do is we did not de-individualize these parties.
Um,
We agreed that it's okay. We let DP, that's the Democratic Party, be
Yeah.
Moi Kibaki's party. And then when Moi Kibaki thought this won't get me elected and he moved to NAC, that party sort of died. When Raila Odinga moved from LDP and formed, I think it was NDP,
Yeah. Yeah.
shell that did
Mm.
not survive his exit. And every
Mhm.
time he has switched, whatever he has left behind has not survived.
Survive.
Now,
Yes.
Uhuru Kenyatta has been in a fight with
Mm.
those looking to get the Jubilee Party to use it for their own selfish interests.
Mhm.
Now, if he was to let the Jubilee Party go, I guarantee you that that party that once ruled Kenya will cease to exist. It will be a pale shadow of itself.
Mhm.
Imagine KANU, only some 20 years since it left power, has almost no representation in parliament, even in the county governments. So
Mhm.
it's a sad state. We need to imagine our democracy and realize that we cannot mature as a democratic country if we do not build strong political parties that stand for something.
And maybe to take you back the memory lane, if my history serves me well, when President Moi was exiting the, uh, the political scene immediately after NAC Kenya came into power, the way the president was treated was not um, a good send off. You know, I think you can see the clips, like the way he was treated. That is my opinion. But when you look at how the leaders came together, their main aim was to take Moi out of power. If I'm to look at it, to take Moi out of power, because immediately after the former the late president Mwai Kibaki and the right honorable prime minister coming into the office, that disagreement came and they went haywire. So everybody went their way. But the main thing was to take Moi out of power. Then come again. We've had Musalia Mudavadi, all that coming together. Once the goal that I wanted has been achieved or is not achieved, they part ways. We saw that with the president also, and the former president and the current president. They came URP and TNA during the Hague issue together. They went. Once that one was achieved, yeah. From your own now, when you look at what has been happening, do you think the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio will stand the test of time for them to stick together even for, let's say, 20 years before them disintegrating?
Let's start with Azimio.
Yeah,
Before we had Azimio, we had NASA.
yeah,
Before we had NASA, we had COD. Before we had COD, we had
uh,
NAC.
yeah,
So there's clearly a trend there
yeah,
that the individuals in this formation do not go to the next election using the same vehicle. So I can
mhm,
guarantee you that Azimio will morph into something else
mhm,
before the 2027 general election.
mhm,
On the other side, the Kenya Kwanza Brigade, they are the same people who were in Jubilee mostly. And Jubilee in 2012 2013 was TNA and URP coming together.
yes,
And I can take you back. So clearly, these are not individuals who believe in building strong institutions. I
mhm,
will commend the Right Honorable Raila Odinga because he has kept ODM intact
yes,
for quite a
mm,
long time, even
mhm,
though there have been challenges and they've not been able to hold grassroots elections. But then he's been out of government, but he has managed to at least have a semblance of a functioning democratic political party. Now, there is another one, the Wiper Democratic Party. You recall it was ODM Kenya, and then it rebranded to Wiper.
mm,
It's still a parliamentary party. It has representation in both Senate and National Assembly and in a number of county assemblies. So these individuals, they are the very same people who have exploited our tribal rifts.
mhm,
They have broken institutions when they do not suit their selfish interests, and they have regrouped. So I will not be surprised if people crossed the floor in
mhm,
2027, some leaving Kenya Kwanza to
mhm,
join those in Azimio to form some other new ambiguous or amorphous group, and vice versa. I expect that to happen. What I don't expect is for Kenyans to be hoodwinked again like they were in previous years. You recall the Kenya Kwanza Brigade originally sold the divide and rule narrative of hustlers versus dynasties.
mhm,
And unfortunately, the other day, this debate was reignited. But then, after the president rode on this narrative and got elected, he has not honored any bit of what he said he would do for the hustlers. In fact, life today is more unbearable than it was before. So, what I expect to change is I expect that Kenyans have gotten some bit of political education to not be hoodwinked, to just follow a bandwagon because it has a favorite politician. They need to look inwardly and see who will best serve their interests.
but will they do, because like have Kenya reached that a point of interrogating somebody, like interrogating a personality? What do you want for us? What do you want for the country? What do you want to do for us? And they look at their history, because you find that the money is winning the hearts of so many. If you have a candidate who really has good policies that can tackle the issues that we have in the country, and there's another candidate who does not have policy but he has money, and you will find that the guy with the good money will be elected. Has Kenya reached that point whereby they can say, okay, let's eat the money but elect somebody who is going to solve our challenges? Have we reached that point?
First and foremost, let me just say that majority of Kenya's youth are
Hmm.
not tribal to
Yeah,
begin with.
yeah.
A research was conducted and it verified that fact. Now, number two, I know of constituencies where the members of parliament that made it through were not necessarily those who had the most money. Those with money dished out whatever they had, but when the D-Day came, the electorate voted using their conscience, or at least some other metric that's not just money. I'll give examples here. You see, like there is that very controversial politician from Mumias East.
Yep.
Yes, he was not elected because he gave out the most money. In fact, he did not have money to dish out. In the previous election cycle, there was this MP from Meru County by the name of John Paul Murigi,
Yes.
who had just one pullover. In fact, his symbol when people went to vote on the D-Day was a pullover because that's
That's what he
all.
had.
Yes,
I can remember.
and they reaffirmed their decision in the 2022 election by voting him back because they were happy about the work he had done. Now, when you go to the lower levels of members of county assembly, you will find a lot other examples of people who went in not
Mhm.
because they had the most money to give, but because the electorate thought they will serve them better. So money plays a huge role, but then it's not the only factor. Kenyans are waking up to the reality that the quality of leadership matters. So over time, I'm sure things will keep improving and the crop we get in office will get better with every election that we go through.
Mhm.
But of course, it may be a long time, but we are on that path.
Mhm. Now, let us come to the house levy that has been very controversial and that the government is pushing so hard. Yeah. And when you listen to the president talking about house levy, is all about employment. So, and if you look at the majority of Kenyans who are out there, there's so many of Kenyans who have graduated from our universities, and that is the only sector, like president has made it like this is the only place that all these Kenyans are going to have employment. Why do you think so much president is so much adamant on it? And to the extent whereby even the speaker of the National Assembly would go to court to appeal the decision of the judgment that was made, that it was unconstitutional.
Because for them, it's a viable cash cow, one where they will take your money and run, and there is nowhere you will take them.
Mhm.
It's designed for them to benefit from inception all the way to the perpetuity that they hope this project will run. So, this project, number one, I have told those who have cared to listen that it's not about providing houses for Kenyans. Kenyans have since independence housed themselves. In fact, I tell people that at independence, the government then pledged to give Kenyans free education. To date, the government has never succeeded in building schools for all Kenyans, let
Mhm.
alone houses.
Oh,
Benson, just
yes.
think about that. Over 60 years, the government that guaranteed Kenyans that they would get quality education has not succeeded in building enough schools for Kenyan
Yes.
children. Now they want to build us houses. We
Mhm.
know this is a scam in the offing. I told people when Uhuru Kenyatta initiated this project, I think in 2018, that they will take your money and run. So if we can stop this project, let's do it before it's implemented. Unfortunately, the Kenya Kwanza regime has gone forward and they've taken people's monies, they've broken ground in the guise that they are building us houses. But believe me, this is the biggest scandal that Kenya has ever seen. They will build houses just to show off that there is work happening, but addressing the problem of housing, that they will not do. So let the courts look into these cases that have been brought before them. People
Mhm.
say the halls
mhm,
merely because of technological hitches here and there, which
yep,
will be removed. But we need to sit back and ask, how is it possible that I will be deducted to contribute towards building a house for which, because of my status,
so,
I do not qualify?
mhm,
How does government take land and then take money from Kenyans, build houses, and then these houses end up being owned by individual Kenyans?
mhm.
It's not making
Makes
sense.
sense. Yeah, I hear you.
The suppliers of these materials are
Mhm.
getting subsidies, they are making profits, yet these houses are supposed to cost more than when you build given the market rates. What's really going on?
Even when you look at the one that he was in when the president, I think it was last month, he was in Nakuru County, where the two-bedroom was going for 3.1 and the four-bedroom was going 4.2. So my question was, if and they were selling at the market price. So let's say like I have the money and paid it off, will I still be contributing because like it is affordable housing that I've gotten? Will I still be contributing, or now if I'm working, my employer will not deduct the money?
Now, those are the questions Kenyans have been asking, and unfortunately, no answers have been forthcoming.
Mhm,
You tell me, where else in Africa has a scheme like this been hatched and been successful? It's
mhm,
just like the bottom up transformation model that they sold during the campaigns, which they no longer talk about.
mhm,
So, yes, they may win in parliament because they have super numbers there. They may try to cow the judiciary and maybe clear the hurdles, but deep down, Kenyans should not forget that this government has deliberately decided to rob them. And in 2027, when we have an opportunity to audit
mhm.
them, let us all come together and say, you robbed us, because that's what's going on today.
Okay, I know we are almost winding up. We still have a few minutes. Yesterday there was I think if not yesterday, some there was a ruling that was made about the panel that was selected to continue with the selection of IEBC members, and the judgment was that it should continue the work. And we had also NADCO report that was suggesting that we should include from 7 to 9 members in the commission. And how now are we going to work on it? Because the NADCO report seems to have been a two gentleman agreement with their appointees, if to say, if I'm not wrong, to discuss on the issues that are affecting Kenyans. And right now, the court has made a pronouncement that the selection panel should continue and interview the people who did application. How are we going to navigate about this?
Well, the 2022 election taught us something, that sometimes you can have all the levers of power
Mhm,
and not be able to exploit them to your advantage.
mhm,
Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Raila Amolo Odinga were involved in the selection of the commissioners that oversaw the 2022 election. Those commissioners were not able to give them a favorable outcome in the 2022 election.
mhm,
So it's important who the referee is, but what's more important is adhering to the rule of law. We have a
mhm,
constitution that dictates how provisions of the law should be made, and that happened. And we got a panel. This panel matches its partisan. It was appointed using the right channels.
mhm,
That I must admit. That yes, it may be favoring the incumbent, the president today, but
mhm,
then it went through the process. So I can only hope.
Yeah.
that our views will be accommodated.
Mhm.
The views of Raila Amolo Odinga and the ODM party and Azimio
Mhm.
need to be heard. But what's most important is the men and women who are in that panel need to undertake or discharge their mandate
Mhm.
without fear or favor. If they do that, then I'm sure they'll give us commissioners who will endeavor to give us free, fair, and credible elections. But
Mhm.
even if they allowed for Azimio to come on board
Yeah.
and dictate who is in that panel, they
Mhm.
will still be elbowing out people like MUTHIORA KARIARA who would like to be part of
So,
that exercise.
mhm.
It can't encompass everybody.
Mhm.
But if we are not breaking any law, if we are not partial or partisan,
Mhm.
we should allow for the process to continue. And on that, I say I support the courts for the ruling that they made.
So on just the face value, because to me, what is here is I'm seeing as a country when it comes to election matters, there's that's like that trust amongst Kenyans, especially those who are employed by constitution have given the mandate to give us credible and verifiable election. That trust is not there even amongst themselves, and that's why the bigger political parties would try to make sure that as somebody who is in the commission should try to look after our interest. It is like each of the commissioners maybe are acting as watchdog or over another person. Yeah. How then, as a country, will we move on if people were given the mandate to deliver to Kenyans their votes, still has that, like, I have to make sure that the guy who put me here has to make sure that I protect his interest. What about that lady who is in Garissa, who is protecting her interest with her votes?
Well, what we need to do is to come up with laws through
Mm-hmm,
our parliament, of course,
mm-hmm,
that make it very, very punitive to
mm-hmm,
indulge in electoral malpractices. You
yeah.
see, stolen elections are what give us corrupt governments.
Mm-hmm,
So once you have a corrupt government, because the electoral process was, how do I put it, fraudulent,
mm-hmm,
then you cannot fight vices such as corruption because the premise from which you began was wrong.
mm-hmm,
So if we pass laws where an electoral official, like for instance Chebukati in 2017, when the Supreme Court declared the presidential election null and void,
mm-hmm,
if he would have been surcharged for putting the country through
mm-hmm,
such a cost and embarrassment, then I'm sure those who would come after him would be careful.
mm-hmm,
But then he took us through that election. It was nullified, and then he was given an opportunity to run another election, and then
mm-hmm,
that gave us a government. So in 2022, he knew there would be no consequences. But if we make it very punitive for any electoral officer or official to indulge in malpractice, then I'm sure they will not play with elections. Elections are a matter of life and death.
yes.
But for some people, it's an opportunity to make money, to create contacts, and to do business. That's not how it should be. At the end of the day, I believe that we do not have to have a commission that is permanent. We
Mm-hmm,
can have individuals who work there on a part time basis so that besides just running an election, they have another life.
mm-hmm,
That if they mess these other thing, then they will also be missing what else they do for themselves. But you look at the commission we had, And you realize that even though they did not deliver free, fair, and credible elections, they still
Mhm.
got paid and paid very well. So there were no consequences.
Mhm.
So our parliament needs to look into ways of making it very punitive to indulge in electoral malpractice.
Okay, my brother, once again, I'm very, very, very much grateful and for you to come to our show and have a conversation. And we do have such like conversation about our country because we might be on different political parties affiliation, but what remains, each one of us love our country in different ways. But like there's somewhere whereby the fabric of our country bring us together. Because if we are in a peaceful country, we are having a good country. And a good country will only be good if we have leaders who cares about the people, but not of their interest. So before we wind up, maybe your last remark to our viewers.
Well, I wish to remind Kenyans that we are in a democratic dispensation. We need parties, and parties cannot exist without members. Members are you and me. Let us shun tribal parties. We can love our tribes without hating other tribes. We can come together based on our interests and put those of the nation first because that's the umbrella that keeps us all safe and provides for all of us. Kenya is not short of bold, visionary leaders. We have tried those in the space today, and we have seen what they are capable of doing. We have the problems we are grappling with today because of their kind of thinking. To get out of those problems, we need a different kind of thinking, which is why I want to implore all Kenyans to be sober minded when faced with an opportunity to elect a leader. If you have to go vote for someone because of their tribe, then know that you're a letdown. If you have to go vote for someone because of what they gave you, know that you're not that Kenyan that we want in the great nation of Kenya that we are trying to build. We all have a role to play. Let's play it knowing that this country was bequeathed to us by people who made sacrifices. So we can make sacrifices as well so we can give to our children and those who will come after us a better country than the one we found here. It is possible to change this nation within our generation.
The-
Everything rises and falls on leadership.
Mhm.
Be a leader at home. And if you're able to deliver for your family, if we all did that collectively, we will improve the fabric of our country and we will care who is at the top.
Thank you, my brother, so much. And I will repeat again, it was quite an honor having you on the show and discussing with you. And hopefully, such like conversation will continue. If we need you on an issue that pertains to our country, we will reach you out and you will be here to discuss with our viewers. And thank you so much for those who are watching. Thank you so much, Brother Oteng, Brother Ointo, Brenda, Silas Odhiambo, Nancy Goodyear, June Odhiambo, Donald, Charles Songa. Thank you so much for being with us and always keep it here. Thank you so much and may God bless you. See you on Wednesday and Thursday when we'll be having some good leaders again of our country to have such like discussion. My brother, thank you so much.
Thank you, Benson, for having me.
Yeah. All right. Thank
Have a
you.
great day ahead.